We turn now to the controversial pastime of Civil War reenactments that have actually grown in popularity since the 2020 racial reckoning protests and the removal of the Confederate statues and memorials. For some, these reenactments are a way to pay homage to American history, and for others, it's a shocking and insensitive reminder of America's dark past. ABC News' senior national correspondent Steve Osunsami takes a look.
It's a Sunday afternoon in the middle of Sweet Home, Alabama, and they're out here fighting the Civil War. It's nearly every weekend, really, in small towns, mostly across the South. The guns are real, but the bullets and the dead people are not. As early as supper on Thursdays, these families will leave their modern-day lives and cell phones behind to become weekend actors in Civil War theater. And they say they haven't seen people this interested in years.
They were lined up yesterday from the corner here, all the way around the road, and up the hill to the flag yesterday.
That stuff's heavy.
Okay.
Tanya Hazley is a camp cook and reenactor at the Battle of Janney Furnace, where the South loses the fight.
We have to keep the water going so we can clean the weapons, wash the dishes.
She and her children are here living in cold tents under the shadow of the Confederate flag. She says she wants America to hear that they're not racists.
Some people think that we're racist for doing this. I had people on the northern side. My mom is from Maine. My father's from the South. And so I had people on the northern side that died. I had people on the southern side that died.
Jason Sumner is a high school social studies teacher and says he'll put on the uniform for 6 more events this spring alone.
And it is an offensive history, but it's like I tell my students, it is well and good that history is offensive, because if it's not, we will not develop that emotional connection to the past and we won't learn from it.
The South lost. Why are we celebrating this?
Because it's still history. Win or lose, it's still history. It's still things that we need to remember.
Keeping our history alive.
They do believe that some white Americans are only now needing to remember their Civil War history after seeing the street protests nearly 2 years ago. And they say they can certainly understand how the murder of George Floyd by a white Minneapolis police officer changed the lens that Black Americans in particular are using to look back on our country's racial history. But they tell us they still resent seeing protesters tear down Civil War monuments.
There's a certain group of people in this country who feel that because their sensibilities might be offended, that everything has to change to accommodate that. And the world plain and simply does not work that way.
Chris Ree from Georgia is new to this old world. He says he only started traveling to see Civil War reenactments after the summer of protests.
When everything happened in 2020, I think what really pushed me to really want to go for this reenactments is to try to better help people understand the history.
He's become a star in these circles and puts on the miles sharing performances that he records online.
Tell me how that happened. So how did the protests get you more involved in it?
I mean, not taking anything away from what happened in Minneapolis. I know that was a sad time, but I believe, you know, the monuments being removed and everything else was kind of like a spit in the face, because I kind of looked at it like, well, these things have been around for so many years. Why all of a sudden are we getting, you know, confused with the history that's already been written?
Have you been called a racist?
Yes, I have.
So you're used to being called a racist?
Yeah. I mean, me and my family, we get evil looks everywhere we go. I think one city that we got a lot of looks at was Selma, Alabama.
There's a good reason why there are people in Selma who might find it a little racist to hold a Civil War reenactment in their city. And you'll notice this a bit with folks who say they want to honor their Civil War history, the parts of the past that they set aside. This is also history that needs to be remembered. The state troopers and sheriff's deputies who used their nightsticks to severely wound hundreds of protesters who in 1965 were marching for voting rights in Selma. The bloody scenes were beamed into American living rooms and convinced this country to change its laws. We asked everyone out here pretending to be Civil War soldiers how they explain to their Black friends, for example, how this isn't a celebration of slavery and racial oppression. The answers were usually the same.
But you also have to understand that
They grew up in entirely different times and saw things we see as abhorrent as necessary back then. And what is truly god-awful was seen as socially acceptable.
Martin O'Toole is a spokesperson for the Sons of the Confederate Veterans. His group is suing in some cases to stop cities from removing Civil War monuments from public places. He says it should be perfectly acceptable for people in the South to celebrate the Confederacy.
On the other side of that coin, I'm trying to imagine what my life would have been like if I were alive at the time. You know, I certainly wouldn't be, able to talk with you in this setting. It's just hard for people to say, let's celebrate slavery.
I don't see any celebration of slavery going on today.
Are you seeing in your membership a greater interest now than you saw 5 years ago?
I would see that there's more passion because they feel like they're under attack. And so that we're being told that they're the most singularly wicked and evil people that have ever lived on the planet. We're told that the Confederate experience was just a veil of tears for almost everybody concerned, certainly for all black people and stuff like that.
But the Confederacy wasn't really that great for black people in America. To many, it's still today the very definition of white supremacy. Richard Rose is a chapter president of the NAACP in Atlanta, and he says that while we no longer have armies pointing at each other, there are still some people across the South who've been fighting the Civil War since it ended more than 150 years ago.
It's a cold, cold war.
It's a cold war.
He's one of the black leaders trying to remove the largest Confederate monument in America, the giant carvings of 3 Confederate generals at Stone Mountain, east of Atlanta.
The monuments, the carvings should be completely covered and destroyed. They're not works of art, and they are not historical.
Completely covered and destroyed. Sandblasted.
Completely sandblasted, dynamited.
Weren't most of these monuments put up long after the Civil War?
Long after the Civil War. Stone Mountain, for example, was not finished really until 1972, and many of them were on the heels of civil rights gains.
But the man who's the chairman at Stone Mountain, who is also African-American, says that wiping the mountain clean is a bad idea, and he says state lawmakers will never let it happen.
I have no problem with the carving. Removing that carving will not change people. The only thing gonna change people is change of heart.
It's what we heard at this park in Alabama, where the actors are firing their fake cannons and fake bullets in the name of history. Near the entrance, there now sits a Civil War monument to Confederate Major John Pelham, who led the losing fight that they recreate here every year. It used to sit here on this busy road about 20 miles away in Anniston, Alabama. But today, most of the people in that city are black, and they moved the monument to this make-believe battleground less than 3 months after George Floyd was killed. On the inscription, it says that Major Pelham was gallant and beloved. Today, the young reenactor who plays him says the crowds got even bigger when the statue moved.
I would say so, because they're seeing the significance that they want to pass on to their children of why these, monuments, should stand.
The war he's fighting isn't just the fake one. The battle here is over culture, history, and truth, and the people fighting it are very real.
They don't do this in Germany.
They do not do it. There are no statues of Hitler, and yet we remember. We know what the history was. We know what the history is. And none of this is about history. What country celebrates a failed insurrection against itself? And that's what all of these reenactments do.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.